Good evening. I'm Catherine Cunningham, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Northern Nevada. At this time, we kindly ask that you silence all cell phones, and all who are able, please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The League of Women Voters is so proud to host this fourth and final night of the 2024 election forums, along with our partners, the AAUW Capital Branch and the Sierra Nevada Forums. Our planning committee consists of local volunteers who are committed to presenting informative, nonpartisan forums as a free public service to our community. These forums would not be possible without the generous support of our co-sponsors, the Nevada Appeal and KUNR Public Radio. We'd like to give special appreciation to Adam Trumbull, the editor of the Nevada Appeal, who has been an integral part of our planning with these forums through the years. We are so fortunate to have such top quality local journalists to cover issues that are important to Northern Nevada. I encourage you to subscribe to the Nevada Appeal and lend your support to KUNR Public Radio. We also wish to acknowledge the fine work of our videographer, Jeff Mulvihill of InstaImage, who has filmed each of the 2024 forums. These videos are available on the Nevada Appeal website. We appreciate the staff of the Brewery Arts Center. They've worked hard to prepare the facilities for this event, and we sincerely thank the Wild Horse Children's Theater for graciously rescheduling their rehearsals so that we could use this stage tonight. We're collecting donations for the Wild Horse Theater in the lobby. Just look for the unicorn-shaped piñata. And we could all use a little more sweetness in our lives, so go see Willy Wonka. In addition, we sincerely thank the candidates and the presenters of the ballot questions for being here to answer questions before a live audience. Established in 1920, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political action network. The overarching goal is making democracy work. There is nothing more important to this goal than having informed voters, and this forum tonight helps us achieve that goal. Misinformation and disinformation may be presented as fact during tonight's discussions. It is up to each of us to sort out facts from misinformation. Tonight's forum will include candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives, District 2, as well as presentations on Ballot Question 1, Board of Regents, Ballot Question 2, Modernize terminology, Ballot Question 4, Remove slavery language, Ballot Question 5, Sales tax exemption for diapers, Ballot Question 6, Abortion access in the Nevada Constitution. The format for the congressional candidate discussion is as follows. Each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement, followed by a question and answer segment. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question with 30 seconds available for rebuttals. Each candidate will be allotted 1 minute for a closing statement. We are thrilled to have Carson High School students stationed in the aisles to take your questions. These students have assisted with all 4 nights of our forums, and please join me and they've done a fabulous job. In addition, we have, 11 or 12 high school students attending in the audience. So it's just great to see that level of engagement, especially among our young folks. We ask that you write 1 question per index card, and please address your question to both candidates. The volunteers at the table will screen the questions just to avoid duplication. And please note that due to our time constraints, the moderator may not be able to ask every question that's submitted. We very much appreciate having a live audience, and it's exciting to see so many of you here tonight. In the interest of adhering to our tight schedule, we ask that you refrain from applause until the end of each segment. Tonight's moderator is a familiar voice for many of us from our morning commutes. Lucia Starbuck is an award-winning political reporter with KUNR Public Radio. She hosts a monthly show called Purple Politics Nevada, featuring lawmakers, community leaders, and voters. Please welcome Lucia Starbuck.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. I'm super excited to hear from our candidates about where they stand on some really pressing issues. As Catherine mentioned, we will start with the opening statements. You will get 2 minutes. We'll go off of alphabetically. Congressman Amodei, please take it away.
Thank you, Gia, and thank you to the League for doing this. I've been attending these since they were actually held at the community center, so here for quite a while. Somebody says, oh, that was before my time, so that didn't make me feel really young. But anyhow, it's nice to be back. I also had to do a disclaimer for some folks. It's like I'm usually fairly casual and stuff like that, but for this forum, it has been my custom over the years to actually try to dress up and impersonate what a congressman looks like. So don't think I've found the Lord or anything else like that. But anyhow, it's nice to be here. You know, this is the only seat that has the responsibility out of the 535 on both sides of the Hill for taking care of Northern Nevada. And so, while the Senate folks have to cover the whole state, the other 3 members of the delegation are centered in Las Vegas, and so are their districts. This is the one whose job and reason for existing is to take care of what I refer to as original Nevada. It upsets the people from Las Vegas when I refer to it that way, but that's kind of part of the intent. So it's a broad spectrum in terms of you've got the urban issues of Reno and Sparks and the Truckee Meadows and then the 4 counties region, and then you've got stuff that's of concern to Carlin, to Ely, to Fallon, to Elko, all the 80 and 50 corridors. It's a challenge. It's not something where you come in and do the same thing every day. You react to what's going on. Of course, it's how you vote, but it's what you do to solve problems in a state that's 85% owned by the federal government. So you have people that have issues with federal agencies all the time. Veterans Administration, Bureau of Land Management, FERC, if you live in Ely right now with a project that's being reviewed out there. And so it's be ready to go in any specific direction at once. I think a lifetime of living Nevada puts me at an advantage for doing that. And hopefully you'll think that that's a good idea for the next 2 years.
All right, thank you. That was Republican incumbent Congressman Mark Amodei. Next, we have nonpartisan candidate Greg Kidd. You'll have 2 minutes for your opening statement as well. Take it away.
Thank you. Greg Kidd here. Is that about right? Okay. All right.
Yeah, you want to be a bit close to the mic. That was for Congressman Amodei.
So, show of hands in the audience. How many folks here weren't born in Nevada? Oh my gosh. I'm glad I asked that question as opposed to how many were born here. Look, all of us, we made a choice to come here. You know, Mark didn't have any choice in that matter because he was just born here. Look, I feel really lucky. This is the place, of all the places I've lived in the world, I came from Connecticut. This is where I chose to be. I feel very lucky. I taught at a class on a social sort of studies, a sort of a sociology class at UNR, and it was on exceptionalism and divergence. And I asked the students, what is the state that's the most unusual in the United States, the most exceptional, the most divergent? And they said things like Florida, New York. No, it's Nevada. This place is more unlike anywhere in the world. We have the resources, we have the people, and we have an amazing history. And so I feel honored to be here. I'm interested, obviously, in Nevada's history. It's been amazing. But really what we're here to talk about tonight is the next 100 years. And though I'm the new kid on the block, I'm here to learn quickly, I'm here to listen, and I am here to work with you to come up with a strategic plan to make Nevada's next 100 years the most amazing, to make this state, this district, the most prosperous in the United States and in the world. I look forward to tonight. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to get into some questions. As a reminder, you will both have 2 minutes to answer and then a 30-second rebuttal. So let's start. It's very fitting that we're meeting here tonight in Carson City. Just recently, there was a mistake on the ballots that required those ballots to be resent to Carson City voters. That has further eroded mistrust of the voting system, confusion. So even though there isn't any evidence of widespread voter fraud in Nevada in previous elections. What measures would you like to see to ensure that elections are fair and accurate? Since we had Congressman Amodei start, we'll have Mr. Kidd start this time. 2 minutes, so please let us know your thoughts.
Sure. The bedrock foundation of this country is the right to vote and also the confidence to know that your vote has been counted and counted once. I have a long-term history in the world of security and identity, from working for the Federal Reserve to working in Silicon Valley on solutions that help people have the ability to prove who they are and what they've done. So I think a tremendous foundation is for people to have multiple ways to prove their identity and to inclusively be able to vote. And so yes, government IDs are one way, but we have other methods, and they've been proven around the world. And I want to see everybody feel confident that they voted and voted once. And I want to make sure that everybody has access to the ballot. And so that could be a government ID, but we have other methods as well. Biometrics, we have mobile phones, which people use, and other countries have addressed this issue, and they have high turnouts and high confidence. There's nothing in the numbers today that suggests there has been a problem, but still, some people prey on fear and have made that a bigger issue, maybe than it is. But look, perception is reality here. So I support and favor everything we can do to make sure that, first, everybody can make it to the ballot box, their vote will be counted, and have multiple ways to prove that who you are and that you have voted and voted once. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Amodei, 2 minutes.
Thanks, Lucia. Well, I don't have a problem with the integrity of Nevada elections, especially in Congressional District 2. People make mistakes from time to time. That happens.
Can you move the mic a bit closer to you, please?
Well, I didn't want you to hear me, so that's why I have no problem with confidence in election integrity in Congressional District 2. People make mistakes from time to time. That happens. I don't think that there's anything to indicate that anybody is trying to hijack an election or anything else like that. Do I think voter ID is a good idea? Yes, I do. Do I plan to vote for whatever the question is that says voter ID? Yes. Right now, and by the way, an interesting thing that nobody talks about, see what we spend on elections. Not a lot. And I'm not a guy who believes that money is the answer to everything, but if you want all sorts of these safeguards, then guess what? It is going to cost your local officials a lot more money than they're spending now. Not saying you should or shouldn't do something, I'm just saying be ready for the price tag. Right now, the real ID from Nevada DMV, your driver's license that you have to show when you do a lot of stuff, is readily available. Good first step. Let's take it that direction. And then if there is better stuff that comes up, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a good first step. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and put a bunch more money into what's going on. And let's see how that works first and go from there.
Mr. Kidd, 30 seconds to respond. Also curious, how will you be voting for ballot question 7? Do you support voter ID?
Well, I support voter ID, but multiple forms. So I do not believe there should only be one form of voter ID. So I will be voting against Proposition 7 because it specifies there's only one way to prove your identity, and I believe there are multiple ways. And talking about cost, I agree. And other countries and other states have moved forward. And so to be able to get credentials, including voting credentials, not just your driver's license, on a mobile phone, which 97% of Americans have, I'd like to see those methods because they both increase inclusivity and they also reduce the cost of voting. And so I'm for measures like that. I want to see Nevada be a leader, not a laggard in that field.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kidd. And 30 seconds, Congressman Amodei, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
If there's nothing else I'd like to add, I yield back my time.
Whoa.
Sounds good. Many voters I talk to say they want to see bipartisan solutions. Congressional District 2 represents Purple, Washoe County. Provide specific examples about how you'll work across the aisle, and how can you assure voters that you will break party ranks, or in Mr. Kidd's case, your caucus? We'll have you, Congressman Amodei, start this one, please.
Well, that's great. Listen, CD2 is considered to be, by registration, a Republican district. You've never seen a campaign ad from me saying, you should vote for me because I'm with the Elephant Party. We work with everybody we need to solve the problems. Some of those examples where we've actually done it, some of you may or may not be aware of the Bureau of Mines building just off the quad at UNR. There was radium contamination. It was like, what are you doing? A couple of presidents ago, they said, hey, if you want to help us with something, get us some money to remediate that. During the time when Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker and the Appropriations Committee was run by the Democrats, Betty McCollum, who was the chair of the Interior Subcommittee on Appropriations, said, hey, we got to do this to clean up the building, blah, blah, blah. You have the kind of relationship where Betty McCollum, credit where credit is due, fought for us in the Four Corners discussions later on in appropriations and said, we've got to do this, we got to get this money done. Why? Not because of me or Republicans or Democrats. It was the right thing to do. Another example is NAS Fallon needed to be expanded so our war fighters could train to the same way that the folks that they may have to fight against have the ability to do that. That's not only naval aviators, but SEALs and all that stuff. Couldn't get it done during the Trump administration. I'm still trying to figure that one out. Got it done during the Biden administration. So it's not sex or violence, actually. And it's not the sort of stuff that somebody's going to interview you on a TV show nationally, but it's work that needed to be done not only for America, but for Nevada. And it's work that we got done because we have the credibility with folks to say this is about getting the right thing done, not about getting wins for donkeys or elephants. They got it done. So there's a couple of examples.
Thank you. And Mr. Kidd, 2 minutes, let us know your thoughts.
Sure. A long time ago, the most liberal Republican and the most conservative Democrat overlapped. And that was called the middle. And back in the days of Reagan and Tip O'Neill, oh man, those guys fought politically, but they got stuff done. And, you know, their disagreements were during the day, and at night, you know, they could break open a beer and have a conversation. And I miss those times. And I don't see those times as only in the past. I see those times in the future. When I went to Washington about 25 years ago to work for the Federal Reserve, which was created by the government, but is not part of the government, we always worked in a bipartisan way. So the Fed, you're working with Democrats and Republicans to fix issues, and it's the groundwork for the independent central bank that's made the US dollar a winner all around the world. I want to see examples of that in other walks of life. And since coming to Nevada, I've seen what can happen when I work with, say, Jackie Rosen on legislation, in this case for financial innovation, to get her up to speed, along with Chuck Schumer and 10 other Democrats that voted with all the Republicans for bipartisan legislation in financial services. Now, there's controversy around that, and that bill was vetoed by the Biden administration. Okay, it may be put forth again under Harris or under Trump, and I hope it'll be passed. And so that's an example of me wanting to work with Democrats and Republicans, including Cynthia Lummis in Wyoming, very red state. But on issues like that, there are folks in this country on both sides of the aisle, and I will always work with those folks, as I have since my days at the Fed, to get passed for this country what's good for America, good for Nevada, and good for this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Amodei, would you like to add anything to that or respond?
I yield my time back.
Okay. You're not getting that later. But
Fair enough.
I want to circle back to the first question, election integrity. We've been getting some great questions from the audience about the election. So 2 yes or no questions. 1, did former President Trump lose the 2020 election? And will you both commit to accept and honor the election results in November? Congressman Amodei, let's start with you.
Well, he didn't lose the election in Congressional District 2, but he did lose it by 100,000 votes in Clark County, which meant he lost Nevada by 35,000.
Right.
And the answer to the second question is yes.
And Mr. Kidd?
I yield my time back and agree 100% with your answer. Where's J.D. Vance when you need him?
He's hanging out with Tim. What's his name?
Yeah, he's hanging out with Tim.
I guess a similar question then, do you both believe that Joe Biden is the president, that he was elected by the country?
Yes.
Let me see.
You heard it here first.
Yes.
All right, moving on to something we also hear from voters all the time, immigration. A bipartisan committee prepared the Border Act of 2024. It was killed earlier this year. What aspects of this bill do you like, and what changes would you recommend? Mr. Kidd, let's start with you for 2 minutes, please.
So I'm a little bit familiar with what went on from the bill that was put forth by Senator Lankford in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is where I have made a significant investment in the banking industry. And that was a tough bill. And if you guys don't know Lankford, he's tough on this issue of immigration. He had a trigger in there that if more than 5,000 people crossed the border a day, this bill would push to have the border closed. And I think for the period of time in the lead up, there had only been 7 days that there weren't more than 5,000. So that was the most conservative immigration bill we've seen. He worked on that bill at the instigation of Mitch McConnell. He found Democratic parties on the other side that would vote for the bill. But look, in this highly politicized environment, there are forces out there that don't want the immigration solved in 2024 because it makes for really, really talking points and it keeps all our pets afraid, okay? So, I think that bill ended up only getting 4 votes, and it was kind of a humiliation for Governor Lankford, which I feel badly about. And so look, I'm not gonna point fingers, but let's be clear, you know, not gonna happen in an election year. And look, in the 118th Congress for the House, I mean, think about what they did get passed. I mean, there was something for Billie Jean King, a memorial, post office changes, but just nothing's getting through that House in this Congress, and that includes immigration. So we're not really, at this time, talking about what's going to be done, because it's an election year. And so I have better hopes for 2025. I think Mark and I both want to work on immigration reform.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Congressman Amodei, what are your thoughts on that legislation?
Well, first of all, hats off to Senator Lankford, who I served with, for having the courage to stick his head into that meat grinder. And when it was finally removed, it was with the predictable results. And so I've been accused by both sides. You know, in the primaries, I'm a rhino, and in the generals, I'm a MAGA Republican. And so you must be doing something right in terms of hitting the balance or something like that. But having said that, those triggers wouldn't have necessarily been bad except for the history, where you've got millions of folks that have already come across. So the trust factor on that is 0. And I've got this theory, I shared it with Greg earlier in the day. I said, listen, everything that gets uber politicized gets destroyed. Education, immigration. I mean, we're even talking about politicizing Israel and veterans, for God's sakes, for now, which is not the way to go if you want to get something done. But for myself, it's like, listen, I signed a discharge petition to bring a Dreamers bill to the floor. Paul Ryan was very unhappy with me. Thought it was the right thing to do, full responsibility. I'm still here, so thank you, somebody. I'm also the one that voted for Jimmy Panetta's bill on farm workers. It was a solution for that particular part of it. Read it all, you know, read the bill, and it's like, there you go. Was criticized for that too, but it's like, think it's the right thing to do. So I don't think we'll get anywhere on immigration until people understand that it's been since Ronald Reagan was the president that we've done an immigration bill. And by the way, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but there is a line in there that says the Congress will establish a system of naturalization. That's immigration. And the fact that we keep punting it, and it's like, well, some people liked what President Obama did. He's filling the vacuum. Some people didn't like what President Trump did, or don't like what President Biden is doing. Until Congress mans up, womans up, and fills that void, we're going to continue to get this scrum.
Thank you. You guys have both been giving up your 30-second responses, but I just want to ask you both again, What pieces of that legislation did you like? People are looking for concrete solutions for immigration. So what do you want to see be done about immigration? I'll give you both 30 seconds. Back to Mr. Kidd, please.
So just to get very concrete, in that, we have this catch and release situation, and so folks come in and they're basically just in the country, the court system's backed up, and then they go missing. And so there were really concrete things in there, like having to wear an ankle bracelet so you could figure out where everybody is. And so now we have this whole politicization thing of like all the missing kids, because it is hard to keep track of folks. And so taking concrete steps to kind of keep track of who's where, because it doesn't really matter whether you're south of the border or you're a French person. If your visa expires, it's probably time to go home. And so there was meat in that bill to get that done.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. And Congressman Amodei?
There was some meat in the bill. The problem with the bill is, and by the way, context is important. The House passed H.R. 2, which was comprehensive immigration reform. Not that because the House passed it, it should be the law of the land. But at least when the Senate had a bill, they got a chance to talk about it and work it and whatever, and they got to the point where they passed it. You know what happened when the House bill went to the Senate? And so, I'm just saying, when you say, well, what do you like about it? I would have liked a chance to have had the same opportunities to discuss the bill and the border, whether it's open or not, that took place in the Senate, but the House wasn't deigned able to do that.
Was there one piece of the bill that you really liked?
Well, I like the fact that you're talking about the visa system. The visa system's broken. Visa overstays are a huge number, and they're not from all nefarious parts of the world. So yeah, but you got to have that discussion to get to the point where you're like, okay.
Lots of topics. I'm getting a couple of questions about housing. Nevada has a growing population. Everyone raised their hand. I am from Reno, by the way, just saying. How can Nevada implement sound policy to expand housing options? Congressman Amodei, we'll start with you for 2 minutes again, please.
Well, several moving parts to this, but first of all, when you're owned 85% by the federal government and every single community in the state is completely surrounded by federal land, including Las Vegas, it's like, first of all, you need some inventory. And in order to get inventory from the federal government, in other words, transfer land from the federal government to a municipality or a county or something like that, for them to deal with developers and do their thing, you have to pass a lands bill in the Congress. And so it's not because we're great people, it's just when you're from Nevada, that is part of your radar screen that's at the top half all the time. We've been pretty successful in getting those done, and nobody here is ready for this statement. I miss Harry Reid in the Senate for lands bills. Because you know what? When you got the conservation element done to Harry's liking, those bills went. Now that's nothing against Jackie or Catherine, but apparently Harry didn't get permission from everybody on the natural resources staff in the Senate, and they felt like he had kind of rolled them. To which my response is, well, when you get elected to the Senate 6 or 7 times from someplace, maybe you can roll some staff members too. But having said that, that's the opening piece of it. But then you also have to deal with permitting, where it's like it takes rights-of-ways for all those things. But then you also have to look at what's going on with the locals in terms of, do we want to do something that's in a resource irresponsible manner? No. Do we want uncontrolled growth? No, we don't. Do we need to make sure that we have water and sewer and flood control and all the things that go with responsible development? Yes. But the locals have a role to play in that as well, and look at that, because once you get the land, which is not easy to do, there's still a ton of cost wrapped up in how do we build that apartment or that house.
Mr. Kidd, your thoughts?
So first, I want to thank Mark for the 5 land bills he's worked on. I don't think I could have done a better job than Mark on that, and I don't think I will be able, and if I'm in this office, I will ask Mark for all the help I can get.
Will you help him, Congressman Amodei?
Yeah, give me Harry Reid back and we'll do some great things. Weren't expecting that one, were you?
Sorry, Mr. Kidd, go ahead, sorry.
Second thing I'd like to quickly say, Captain Kidd was not a pirate, he was a privateer, and Mark Twain, when he came here, distant relative of mine, it was an accident, he almost burned down Lake Tahoe, just needed to get that in tonight. Okay, but back to this issue, okay? I did get schooled when I went to Carson City, to the City Hall, to the government building there, interested in the mint, but I learned something. Why is 85% of our land owned by the federal government? No. Okay, hint. What's the minimum number of people you need to have be a state in America? 60,000. And in 1864, how many did we have? 22. Short 38. You know, kind of like short some number of votes in Georgia. What was the deal made? We'll trade you statehood, but you got to give back all your unallocated land in the state to the federal government. That's how we lost our land. And we've been working to get it back ever since. Thank you, Mark. Okay? But look, there's land on the fringes. We want to get that, especially in the urban areas or areas that need housing. But look, there's land right in downtown Reno that's blighted. I don't quite understand, and I'd like to talk to Hillary about this, why isn't there a bond issue to buy up that land and put affordable housing there? Not that we won't keep doing land bills, but let's make use of what we've got. We've got a real affordability crisis here because wages have gone up this much, housing has gone up at 6 times the rate. We need to invest, bond issues, invest in Nevada, both on the fringes and downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Congressman Amodei, would you like to respond for 30 seconds?
Only on a historical thing. All those 22,000 people, none of them were born in Nevada, so it doesn't mean it's a bad thing if you weren't born in Nevada. Thank you, I yield back.
Mr. Kidd.
I yield back as well.
Oh, I never met politicians who don't want to take up the microphone. Talking about, land, but more specifically, what kinds of policy would you like to see to make housing more affordable? Mr. Kidd, let's start with you. Oh, wait, I think you went. No, I think it's your turn, yes. All right, sorry. Mr. Kidd, go ahead.
You're losing track with so many people passing on their time. Okay. So look, every community has this challenge. I've lived in other states and other parts of the world, and there's a stigma associated with just quote-unquote low-income housing. And so what we want to do is build a diverse housing base here. Again, I will come back to the example of the blight in downtown Reno, where we knocked down a bunch of motels, and there hasn't really been a tax structure that's incentivized the folks that are squatting on that land. I mean, at least turn it into a park. Like right now, it is in a dismal situation. And so yesterday I was at a housing complex. It's over 200 units of affordable housing. It's about, you have to have an income of below $42,000, and then you're paying about $1,100 a month. And it really bummed me out because it said it was for seniors, and that was over 55. And I realized that would mean me, okay? But that's one housing project. We're way short in the country, in Nevada. And so, one of the things I would observe is Nevada has a great history, free, fair, and wild. You've heard that, which means we don't plan a lot. I mean, that's kind of the Nevada way. We kind of wing it, and we don't have a permanent fund like Alaska does or Norway, and so we don't make strategic investments. And I know this isn't quite the federal level issue, but I would support a permanent fund for Nevada to not spend just year to year, but to take money, invest it, and make long-term investments in housing, in healthcare, in education, upgrading the electrical grid, building the lithium loop, and being strategic about our future. Because what we've done now, while we are free, fair, and wild, we've earned the 50th position on education and mental health, and the first position, highest unemployment in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Congressman Amodei, housing affordability. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a few things that go into that. It will come as no shock to anybody here that interest rates is one of them. And there's a lot of moving parts that go into interest rates. But when you have a debt that's, and I'm not an economist, but when you have a debt that continues to grow in trillions, and then you see how the markets react to that, and I'm not a market expert either, but you look at that and you go, the affordability of a loan is a phenomenal challenge right now. And so if you're starting out and you're like, what's the deal here? Part of the problem is, do you know that the interest on the federal debt is higher than the defense budget right now? So, not an economist, I would submit that that is not a good financial practice. And so if you want to make housing more affordable, that's one of the things you got to look at. One of the other things you got to look at is the cost of construction. What's a 2x4 cost? Are you building with steel instead of wood? What's cement cost? What's it cost to hire people to not pound nails anymore, speaking of being old, shooting them with a gun or whatever, but it's like the cost of hiring those people, paying a living wage, benefits, all that stuff, that's not getting cheaper at all. And then, oh, by the way, you got supply chains. Well, we can't get the glass for the front of your dealership for 6 months because of whatever. We can't get the electrical components to increase the grid out there for substations and things like that. That's a all hands on deck thing in terms of, yeah, the federal government's got a role in some of that and is directly responsible for some of that thing, like interest rates. But the other stuff is frankly, it's like all hands on deck. How do we help supply chains? How do we help the costs? And by the way, energy's in there too, sneaking around.
Mr. Kidd, is there anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely.
You mentioned the fund you would like to see. Where would that come from? Where would that money come from?
Well, Nevada has in the world the lowest tax on mining. I'm not suggesting changing that for gold and silver, but for lithium, that lithium is going to come out of the ground. And I think if we take the example of Alaska, Norway, other mineral-rich states, we need to put some of that money aside. Right now, Lithium America is, of course, Canadian and Chinese-owned. And so money should not just leave the state. It should be put into the fund and invested, like other states that are mineral-rich in other countries. I do want to say, as the Fed person, I am a little bit of an economist, and yeah, the debt is a problem. And so if we're in a situation where we have candidates that are suggesting that, the president should meddle with the Fed, kind of take an Argentina approach, or that we should give tax breaks to people like me and not cut spending, yeah, we're going to have spiraling deficits, which leads to debt, which leads to high interest rate. And if we're going to have Congress that can't get a budget passed, you know what happens? Ratings agency downgrade us. What does that mean? We all pay higher rates, just like if you have a bad credit score, you pay extra. So we can't be knuckleheads in Congress. We got to pass stuff. If we want to basically make Hamilton turn in his grave and start doing Argentina-type tricks, and it was actually mentioned today, to basically manipulate the Fed, to turn on the printing press, because we still have ink. You think the debt payments we have now are high? You think other countries are going to keep buying our debt and letting us live in this fantasy land? No. And so I am a fiscal conservative. I do believe, and this is an issue, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue, I think both parties have been contributing to this out-of-control debt. We haven't had a balanced budget since, who was that crazy fiscal conservative? Bill Clinton. It's crazy, right? Bill Clinton. That was the last time we balanced the budget. I'm not a balanced budget guy, but yeah, we do need to pay attention to that, or all that is going to trickle through and make housing that much more unaffordable.
Congressman Amodei, Mr. Kay was given 2 minutes, so do you have a response as well, also on this issue?
Well, I find it interesting when we talk about mining that we kind of skip over some of it that kind of goes to some of the other questions. They pay a living wage. They have full benefits. Their people can afford to buy their own food. They can afford to buy homes in their communities that they live, or whatever they choose. And so when we talk about what it costs us to do business, oh, and by the way, we're a net exporter of what they produce. And I'll just say this, if every industry paid and provided the benefits that industry did, it'd be a lot cheaper for the state and local governments to do the things that we expect government to be the safety net for. So when we say, hey, that isn't, they're Canadian or they're whatever, it's like, well, they pay in US dollars and they create US jobs. And so, yeah, is it time to look at that? Yeah, but it's not time to do some of the stuff that's been in the past where it's like, gotcha, and we need to go to them, because they've been gone to plenty of times. And if you're just talking about fair share for what their impact is, I have a different view in terms of look at what they pay their folks and look at what they do in their communities. And so I don't think that's, it's like, listen, everything's on the table, they ought to be on the table too, but to somehow suggest that because gold is up to whatever the God's name is.
2,600.
Silver's up 30. I'm a silver guy. Can't
31.
Gold. Yeah. So when you sit there and look at that stuff, it's like, listen, that's an industry that's paying its way and then some. And I'm happy that they're here. But if you want to start looking at who ought to do what to cover their share, that's a fair question to ask, but it's also a fair contextual conversation that should be had.
Let's talk about mining. As the demand for green energy like lithium surges, Indigenous community members and environmentalists are voicing their concerns that some mining sites destroy sacred lands or contaminate resources like water, negatively impact endangered species. So how will you balance the concerns of Indigenous community members, environmentalists, and this lithium boom that's taking place in Nevada? Congressman Amodei, let's start with you.
Well, sure. NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, been around since Richard Nixon. That is the administrative due process, which says you will make permitting decisions if it's on BLM land or if it's on other federal land. You will go through this in a way that is totally transparent, hears from everybody, and does their thing. You know, it's interesting because people were talking about doing exploration in the Ruby Mountains of Elko a couple of years ago. And all these letters, and it was with the Forest Service, all these letters, don't let them do it, don't let them do it. It's like, hey, we have something that's called NEPA. Let's see what the Forest Service does in running that process. And lo and behold, they came back and said, no, i.e., it works. And so I'm not saying that when you talk about there were concerns about Thacker Pass, there are still concerns about Thacker Pass. There are still concerns about Rhyolite Ridge because of Eames buckwheat. And so you go through all that stuff with the cultural resource folks, with Fish and Wildlife Service, which does endangered species, and say, hey, what about it? Well, guess what? They've worked a lot of that. By the way, don't forget sage hens, sage grouse, as the people in the East say it. But having said all that, there is a process, and it amazes me sometimes to go, why don't you let the process work and do what it was designed to do and see what it decides? Now, you may disagree, and that's fine. You can still sue somebody and do all that other sort of stuff. But guess what? There is a process out there that isn't just, hey, somebody went out to a dry lake bed and decided that they're going to go ahead and mine lithium. Although it is ironic that the administration, through the Department of Energy, gave $3 billion to Lithium America, that Canadian company, to mine lithium at Thacker Pass.
Thank you, Congressman Amodei. Mr. Kidd.
I love silver, I love gold. I like my electric car, my batteries in my phone, and the laptop. One day, the minerals will be gone, but we will still be here. And so the strategy of not putting money aside for the future is not strategic. It's not an investment in Nevada. And I do believe Nevada, which has the most amazing set of mineral resources of any region in the United States, potentially in the world, needs to plan for the future. And we can't just be hand to mouth. So I do believe we have to, like other states and countries, set some money aside to invest in our people and our infrastructure. And look, I talked to Lithium America. They don't want to be the ones that have to provide all the infrastructure that governments do. If you gave them a trade and said, hey, look, instead of 10 years for a permit, it's 3, you pay 25% off the top, and we'll get to work on providing the missing infrastructure, the water rights, the education, healthcare. You're not supposed to be in those businesses. That's government's job. Your job is to profitably exploit that resource up there. And yeah, it's enough lithium up there to build 1 in 10 cars in the United States for the next 40 years. And so when I talk to the tribal members, and look, they're concerned, they want to be respected, they have a history, bad things happened on that land. They want it to be done responsibly. I worked for the National Outdoor Leadership School, Outward Bound. I'm a conservationist. So yeah, whatever we take out, we have to reclaim. But the interesting conversation I had with a representative from the Native Americans, he said, I have all these concerns for my people, for the land, but look, I drove up here in a Tesla. I know that this lithium is going to come out. We can talk how it's going to come out, when it's going to come out, and really the question is, and what is it going to do for the future of Nevada, because one day it will be gone.
Thank you both. Would you like to take your 30 seconds to respond, and maybe what would you say to Native community members who are speaking out against Thacker Pass? Would you support some of those proceeds going to Nevada tribes?
Well, here's the thing with mining generally, and this applies in the context of your question. And it's not a threat or somebody acting like a second grader saying, I'm gonna take my stuff and go home. But if you can't dig it up and process it and sell it for more than it costs you to dig it up and process, then they don't do it. They're pretty good at adding and subtracting, those engineering types, right? And so, I'm not speaking for Thacker Pass or Rhyolite Ridge or any of those folks, but to have the discussion, by all means. But the problem is a lot of that's become a veto. And so you sit here and you go, wow, I'm trying to follow this, and these dots aren't connecting. They absolutely aren't. When you got, on the one hand, the government saying to Thacker Pass, here's $3 billion from the Department of Energy, dig, baby, dig. And on the other hand, you got, well, what about native concerns and blah, blah, blah. Now, it's been all the way through NEPA, and it's been through some courts as well. By the way, the Ninth Circuit isn't exactly considered pro-mining. And so it's been through all that stuff, and you're at some point in time, it's like, kind of like Greg said, it's gonna come out of the ground. Do we want it to come out as responsibly as possible? Yes. Do we not want to ignore those issues? No, but there's no absolutes.
Thank you, Congressman Amodei. Mr. Kidd, if you'd like to respond, you'll get 1 minute.
I get a whole minute.
Nope, I went over.
That's generous. Okay. So look, there's the lithium mining. We have the gigafactory. We also have Redwood Materials doing recycling. That's 3 legs of a 4-legged stool. It's called the lithium loop. It's something that Lombardo has talked about, Sandoval is excited about, who's at the university. We're missing one piece of the chain. We're good at getting it out of the ground, but then it goes to China for processing, okay? I consider that a problem for Nevada and for the United States. I'm not anti-China, but I consider it a strategic vulnerability. And so I support bills like the Infrastructure Act and the CHIPS Act. When there's money for Nevada and money for the United States to complete the lithium loop, it makes Nevada independent and strong and the United States independent and strong.
Thank you both. Okay, we're going to be moving on to another topic, access to reproductive health care. Would you support federal legislation that limits reproductive rights, including abortion and in vitro fertilization? Please explain your position. Mr. Kidd, we'll start with you.
So the answer is yes. And let me just, you guys might be tough constituents, but I have teenage daughters. They really put me over the rack on this one. And their mother, she's an OB-GYN. And so she does early term deliveries and with medical necessity, late term abortions. And so this has been a kitchen table issue for us. They are amazed that we live in a country where we've seen civil rights progress in many areas, and somehow in this country, women's health care has been peeled off as a special kind of second-tier right that isn't guaranteed at the federal level with the overthrow of Roe v. Wade, okay? It's been kicked down to the states. And look, I realize the states might, regulate fireworks manufacturing and like where you can have a massage, but to take something that I believe is a civil right and make it a state issue so that a woman crossing state lines can lose rights, I can't think of any area where men suffer that kind of loss of rights. Or that the mother of my kids, if she provides an abortion with medical necessity for a woman who might otherwise be on dialysis for the rest of her life or lose her fertility, might be sued by another state for that woman crossing state lines to get access to my children's who provided that operation. That is crazy stuff for me. And so I understand that Nevada, and I support Proposition 6, we're doing the best we can in this environment. But I don't think women's health care should be a zoning issue. And I do believe that should be resolved at the federal level. So I will always stand up for women's health care because I think it's the right thing to do. Also, my teenage daughters will kick my ass.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Congressman Amodei?
Well, even though I'm a lot older than Greg, my daughters are adult daughters.
No, you're not.
And so, but let me just say this. And thank you for holding your applause to the end. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But let me just say this. There has been no problem in Nevada since Nevada, this is an important phrase, Nevada voters said what they wanted the rule to be in Nevada. 24 weeks, you don't need a reason. After that, with medical necessity, that's fine too. They did say you always had to have a doctor involved, which ought to be good news for people who are doctors in the OBGYN area. But what they didn't say was, we want somebody from the federal government, from 49 other states besides us, telling us what the rules are. Because you don't know where that'll end up. Because you know there's states you don't like and there's states you do like. And so I can't sit here as a guy who presently holds an elective office, which the voters gave me for 24 months at a time, and say, by the way, go ahead and throw that away. It hasn't been broken here in Nevada, but if Congress decides to change that for you in a way that says what the voters don't want, then it's like, I will not vote for a federal law, whether it makes it shorter, longer, or whatever. What Nevada voters did turns out to be pretty informed and has worked well since 1990. And I'll just say this about question 6. If you want to put it in the Constitution, that's great. Put the language that Nevada voters said in the Constitution. Can you imagine the field day that lawyers are going to have with what's the phrase, something viable fetus? And by a medical care professional? That's not a word for doctor, and that is not the certainty of 24 weeks, but you can still have one after that. So this bit where there's an emergency for Nevada, and by the way, this is the seat for Northern Nevada, and I know some people aren't going to want to hear this, but it's like, it's been working fine. We don't have a problem. Why in the world would I say, geez, I'd sure like people from 49 other states helping make that rule for us in Nevada when we haven't created a problem? No applause till the end.
Mr. Kidd, would you like to respond for 30 seconds?
So look, I think I might have mentioned Alexander Hamilton before, and so I'm a bit of a Hamiltonian. And so, look, there are some issues, and this is a Jeffersonian thing, that are like states' issues. But I believe certain issues dealing with freedom around race, religion, and gender aren't things that you basically get more of or less of when you cross state lines. And so those are rights that should be for the United States, and they shouldn't be things because you belong to a certain gender, race, or religion, you gotta worry about what happens to you when you cross state lines. And so I love that Nevada is free, fair, and wild. I don't want to be competing on the area of like, yeah, we're better than Idaho or Utah on this level. And I don't like seeing planes flying back and forth in either direction. We have terrible rural health care. And when a woman in Elko has a problem just with a delivery, she's on the plane to Salt Lake. I don't want to see that kind of trafficking in women because we diddle around with laws or healthcare access in this country or in this state. So I want that standard to be guaranteed at the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Congressman Amodei, would you like to respond? You'll have 1 minute.
Let's move on.
Okay. Another question from the audience. Why or why not is climate change an existential threat to America? Congressman, and what do you believe to be the best solution to carbon pollution? Congressman Amodei, let's start with you.
Well, I think climate change is real, and I think it's about carbon. I'll say that again. It's about carbon. And so, if it's really about carbon, then let's have that fight. Let's reduce carbon. Nobody wants dirty air. Nobody wants dirty water. Nobody wants contaminated soil. If it's really about carbon and not, is that the end of my time?
Here, I'll have you pause.
I yield back. Oh, did I get it back?
Yeah, sorry,
Hey, come
please
on, the
continue.
clock's running. This is just like the Oregon-Ohio State game. Don't worry about it. I won't need it. Hey, so anyhow, my frustration, if you hear frustration in my voice, it's like, yeah, let's clean carbon up. But there are ways to do that. And to say any kind of fossil fuel is an evil thing and we should go away from it now no matter what the cost, quite frankly ignores a heck of a lot of technology that's been going on. Oh, and by the way, if it's really about getting rid of carbon, I don't know who was supposed to talk to the people from Microsoft and that are saying, hey, we want to build small nukes now, small or whatever, and so we think everything should be on the table because when you talk about development in Nevada and you talk about all the people that want to do data centers, they take a lot of electricity. more than is in the grid right now. Does that mean we should go back to burning coal? No. But it does mean that if it doesn't put carbon in the air, which is the enemy, we ought to be taking a look at that instead of saying, nope, only one prescription will work in this instance, and all the rest of them are out. So yeah, climate change is real. I'm not concerned with whose fault it is. It's like, okay, let's go fight carbon and quit doing political agendas on both sides. Thank you.
Okay. You're not going to use all your time now? Just kidding. Mr. Kidd, go ahead.
Well, just in case I need it, are you criticizing me? You want me to use more?
Mark's going to have a big credit at the end of tonight.
Yeah, that's right.
So look, I've been out talking with voters. I went to, I'm not really a golfer, but I went to a country club event. And okay, it was a bit Republican. And I got pigeonholed by this guy, and this is right when we had the wildfires here. And what he said is, I want us to, why are we spending all this time talking about climate change and green issues? We should be like worried about these wildfires and what's causing them and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm not usually speechless, but I was speechless there, okay? And so, come on here, we're in Nevada. What do we have? Not today, but we have a lot of sun. And so, how much coal do we have? How much oil? How much gas? We got zip, right? So, independent, like, I think we can all agree, many of us can agree that carbon is contributing. Well, I did see a book that said, all that carbon's good for trees. We need more of it. But, okay. Nevada needs to look at the map. We got a lot of sun. We should be independent and resilient. On top of that, all those carbon products for us are expensive, right? The market will eventually take care of it. The cost of producing a gigawatt of solar is falling rapidly. It's not falling for coal, for oil, for gas. And so, you just extrapolate the lines. And so let's plan, let's make use of what we have, solar. Let's sell it to those Californians, right? And let's be independent and resilient. And we don't have to get all in a Twitter about green versus not green. This is just good common sense. This is conservation in the best sense of the word, a form of conservation that both conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats can get on top of. So we've got some geothermal, got other things, but let's just make our state independent and resilient. Thank you.
Congressman Amodei, would you like to respond and maybe mention, is there one concrete thing you would like to see to address the climate or to address environment?
Well, when I hear the market will take care of it, the market isn't taking care of the cost of energy right now. And when we talk about the next 100 years, it's not a surprise to anybody in this room. It's like, you're going to be back in front of the voters in 24 months, ladies and gentlemen. So if I came back here and said, in 100 years, it's all going to be good, relax, everybody in this room will be dead. You're on a 24-month clock the instant that the votes are in. And so when we say the market will take care of it, it's like, we need solutions to help people in a total context sense. And that means, what's it cost you to drive to work? What's it cost to drive that truck to your grocery store? What's it cost to produce that stuff that they drive to the grocery store? And all those sorts of things. So when you talk about climate change, it's like, yeah, we need to do stuff right now. But it has to be in context where it's like, oh, it'll take care of itself, don't worry about it. It's like, there's plenty of worries right now, and not that you can wave a wand and make them go away, but you need to be able to show progress on how we're doing something that balances resources with what it costs somebody to turn the lights on or not, or turn their stove on or not. And so I just say, we've got to look at nearer term solutions to what energy costs people on the street.
Thank you. Mr. Kaye, would you like to respond? And just a reminder to please be aware of our clock in the front row. Thank you.
Be aware of what?
The clock in the front row. Mr. Kidd, would you like to respond?
Have I been misbehaving?
Probably me.
1 minute and a half. That's how much Congressman Amodei got.
Well, I had some credit, I thought.
I will be stricter on that, my bad.
So look, this is one of these areas where, again, our history, great, free, fair, and wild. We kind of wung it with gambling. We wung it with, mining, a couple of other industries I won't mention. But come on, our electrical rates are way up. We do not have a strategic approach to the electrical grid. We could dump it all on the electricity company, or we could take leadership on this area. And again, this is one of the areas where if the permanent fund was there, I would hope that some of that gets invested in the electrical grid. We need to be strategic. We do have a lot of sun. We could produce huge amounts of energy here, and we have lithium to store it in batteries. So it's not use it or lose it. We store it, we sell it in the evenings. It's a strategic investment. And this is an area where, yeah, we can try to do it ourselves, but the feds are out there. There's money, because this is not good just for Nevada, it's good for the country. And I think we should take that money, regardless of whether it comes from a D or an R. And I think Mr. Lombardo and Mr. Sandoval are on board with that, both from the university, from an R&D point of view, and for completing the lithium loop. Let's control and take charge of our energy destiny. And it can be green, and it can be good economics, and it can bring our rates down.
Thank you. I want to talk about healthcare. Mr. Kidd, you mentioned, what does someone do if they need care and they're in Elko? Many rural Nevadans must travel more than an hour to get some types of care, to give birth, to care for a broken arm, really any kind of specialty care, cancer treatment. What legislation or policies would you like to see to improve access to healthcare for rural Nevadans? Mr. Kidd, we'll start with you.
So our country has faced challenges over time. When we had electricity, we decided to have rural electrification so that rural communities didn't pay more for electricity than urban communities. We built the interstate highway system. If rural communities had had to pay for that on a per population basis, they would have been cooked, okay? We have to recognize, same thing with high-speed bandwidth, what are at the national level, and this is going to apply to Nevada as well, what are strategic imperatives? What kind of state do we want to be? And so on issues like education and healthcare, do we want to have a disparity between the urban areas in Nevada and the rural areas? And if you make a decision that no, we want to have equal access across the state, well, then you're going to have spending priorities that reflect that. And clearly, in rural Nevada, we have terrible access to health care. And that is why in Elko, if you have any problem with a delivery, you're going to Utah. And I don't find that acceptable. And I don't find it acceptable in a whiny kind of way. It's a strategic decision to position Nevada for success. When the mother of my kids graduated from school, we got some incredible package deals from rural areas, including Nevada, to come out and live. But we were going to have kids. And we're going to have kids, you look at the health care they're going to receive, and you look at the education. And if you let those things lag, then your state lags. We need to invest in our people. And so I consider health care one of those strategic investments that will move Nevada from the bottom of the ladder board to the leader on the ladder board. We have the resources. We just have to have the will to do it.
Thank you. Congressman Amadei?
Well, in the time I have been around, there hasn't been a single rural health technology provision that I haven't supported and worked to get funding for to make Renown be able to reach out farther east and other facilities like that to try to, and by the way, for the folks in Las Vegas to be able to reach north. And so that's all hands on deck. The great untold success story of Nevada is these things called FQHCs, Federally Qualified Health Centers. And they are doing a phenomenal job. They're in every community. Now, it's not a hospital, but the hospitals have to be able to pay their people, give them benefits, turn the lights on and off, all that other sort of stuff, as we learned during COVID. And so when you say, we ought to have all that stuff out there, it's like, great, let's have it. Who's going to pay for it? There's no municipalities in the hospital business. It's all private. So unless you want to make that a government thing, probably not something a lot of people would think is a good idea. Then we do what we can to make sure that, and the key word is access. There's FQHCs all throughout those communities, Interstate 80. Not to mention the job that Humboldt General's doing and Northeastern Nevada Medical Center's doing and the folks in Lovelock. They're doing what they can within the resource constraints that they have. Although I find it interesting that when you talk about things ought to be different in rurals, that it's like, well, maybe not the education stuff like that. Well, it's like, well, guess what? That reflects the reality. And so you do what you can to make sure that telemedicine is the best thing going. By the way, that includes veterans, the VA too, for everybody. And so you do the best you can with telemedicine. It's on the rise, and it should be, because it allows that reach to be out there without having to say you got to build a full-blown med center. And then you also do the best you can to fund those things, federally qualified health centers, have doctors, have reproductive care, have all that stuff where it's like we're making progress in a good way.
Thank you. Mr. Kidd, would you like to respond at all for 30 seconds?
Sure. So I'm not saying turn everything into a government service, and we certainly didn't do that with other industries, but you do have to basically decide whether you want to invest in the rurals, and that could be paying private companies to provide services in rural areas. It could be things like Postal Banking Act that would let post offices provide banking services in places where there aren't branches. There's lots of creative ways to do this. Telemedicine's fine, but you have to also be aware there are folks that like say, well, you know, for access to abortion, you have to have a visit to a doctor. These are the things that, you know, you might say you want to basically support something, but look, nurse practitioner for certain issues can work, and abortion access would be one of those. So you're going to have to be flexible, and you're going to have to make a commitment. And so we have to decide, do we want to basically support making rural areas have equal access to services we take for granted in the cities?
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Nevada,
Don't I get my 30 seconds this one time? Please?
I thought he,
Just one time, okay.
I think
this'll
he
be my-
does. He's good at
I
scorekeeping.
won't use all 30, how's that?
okay.
You can say no and I'll just shut up.
Please respond for 30 seconds.
Okay. There are federally qualified health centers in every rural community there are, and they all have physicians. That's a fact. Also, I'm not sure how the post office got into healthcare, but with the experience
an
we've had
example.
with the post office recently, no offense, but I'm a little gun shy about giving them more responsibility in the financial area when they can't figure out why mail shouldn't go to California to be distributed back in Nevada. Don't clap.
Can I'm not talking about the big post office. I'm just talking about little Mabel at the post office being able to give you a money order. That's all.
All right. Lots of topics. Sorry for trying to cut you off, Congressman Amadei. Nevada was the 36th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Would you sign the petition to bring it to the floor and then vote to affirm the ERA as the 28th Amendment? Please explain your position, Congressman Amadei.
Well, yes, I would, as long as I get a chance to read what I'm signing first. Because as we know from the ballot questions, we just want to put in what it's like. The people who write those, and I get it, you know, they've got their views. One thing that's guided me well is always read it before you say you're for it or against it. Love to see it, but the concept, yes.
Okay, Mr. Kidd.
Yes, and I yield my time.
Okay.
Thanks, I needed it.
Conspiracy theories and disinformation have been circulating regarding the recent hurricanes as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. What action should Congress take to stop the spread of harmful information that impedes public safety? Mr. Kidd, we'll start with you. Someone said censorship.
Censorship. So, yeah.
Can we clap?
Okay.
No,
Wait till
okay.
the end.
So look, there's a spectrum between George Orwell in 1984 and like Mad Max, anything goes, right? And between those extremes is this thing called Twitter, right? And it's all on Twitter. And I'm guilty as charged. Twitter got started in my backyard, and we had the saying, which is, Twitter is too important to be left to Twitter. And boy, is that true, okay? So look, we have a tremendous problem with misinformation, disinformation, and censorship in this country. You know, we built the internet on something called Section 230, which means a platform is not a publisher, which means we're not responsible for what people say on the platform. And we've seen the extremes of everything from disinformation over to the other side of basically censorship. And so that's a challenge we've had. We've had it as a cultural challenge. It's one of those things that if I locked the Republicans and the Democrats in the room, said you can't go to the bathroom until you sort this out, I think there'd be a lot of mess in that room because I don't know what the answer, but what I can tell you is that it takes leadership from our leaders. And, we have a situation where, what's going on in Ohio, I highly disapprove of that, where a certain vice presidential candidate is throwing his own state under the bus. Like, that's the weird thing. It'd be different if you were throwing somebody else's state under the bus. But he's got his own Republican governor correcting him. And again, my pets are scared, right? And so, we need leadership, and I do believe it's a disqualifying attribute to not be a role model. And, Charles Barkley said, I am not a role model, but he said that to help us know what real role models are. And so our leaders need to stop doing it, period.
Thank you. Congressman Amodei?
Where's the clock? Don't hide it from me. Okay, thank you. You know what? In the olden days, nobody's objective because everybody's a human being, and we all have our biases and our what we feel about things. But in the old days, there wasn't this almost cottage industry, and so the internet's made it much more fungible. But I'll just say, and I know there'll be some in the room that are upset, when candidates hire consultants who package whatever the information is, true, not true, half true, in context, out of context, and then they feed it to you, and you're like my mom used to tell me, there was a critical article in the Nevada Appeal one day years ago, and I go over there and she goes, Mark, the appeal says you're a jerk. Something like that. And she goes, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I don't know, Ma. If it's in the paper, it must be true. Well, in those days, that wasn't, quite. But nowadays, it's like there's absolutely no accountability for what consultants get paid a lot of money for to put out to you and count on the fact that you're going to go, well, I read it on the internet, I read it on my favorite blog, I saw it on my favorite TV station, whether it's MSNBC or Fox, and you're sitting here going, wow. And when you talk about the hurricane, I'm looking at my time, it's like, listen, as the chairman of the committee who has the budget for FEMA, I can tell you that the money for disaster relief is not the same as the money for soft-sided shelters. Now, that doesn't mean that I agree with them spending that, but there is that outfit called the Senate that thinks they have a say in legislation too. But you're sitting here going, and here's all these people sprinting down there going, oh my God, it's the same money. And it's like, no, it's not. We spent a lot of time telling the people on our side, thank them for asking, don't say that. That is not true. And so you talk about that's one of the latest examples, but it's like, hey, there is no pushback at all. There is no price to be paid for BSing about it, and there ought to be.
Thank you, Congressman Amodei. Mr. Kaye, would you like to respond?
Yes.
Oh, you let him.
Okay. Another question.
Wait, no, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I do.
I was like, okay.
That's an affirmative, right? Yeah, she's sneaky, right? Okay. So look, this morning, Mark and I had a debate, and at the end of the debate, the folks that recorded it said, we lost the audio.
Worst
Audio
fears.
It wasn't that good.
So we were going to have to do the whole thing by lip syncing. But look, and so it would have raised this question: what was really in the room? And this happened before. There was a certain president that had a conversation that was perfect with a certain leader of another country, where they were trading, in my opinion, our national security for dirt on somebody's son. And there was an investigation. And I think Mark Amodei did the right thing here and said, let the system work and let's do oversight. And Mark, you took a lot of heat for that. And I just want to say, I think you did the right thing. And I would have wished I had the courage to do the same thing. But look, we now live in a world where I think Mark has been unfairly punished as being not MAGA enough for Trump and not sort of traditional enough to basically fit in with mainstream consultants. And so all of us, he's been in office, I haven't been, but on other issues, we face the griddle on this. And I think it's a really unfair situation. I think, Mark, you were treated unfairly. And, I'm sure my grievances too. But that example, that's really characteristic. And I'm asking politicians that are not in the room today to have, the courage that Mark had back then at that time to basically just do his job, right? And I hope when that moment comes for me that I will do my job. And so I thank Mark, I thank every other congressperson who's been in one of those situations, and instead of like going off about like people eating pets or who causes hurricanes and space lasers and stuff, that we stick to the facts. Thank you.
Lucia, can you give him a few more seconds to kind of...
Anything you'd like to add?
I don't want to back any of that back. No, I yield.
All right, last question for you both tonight. What ethical standards should be set and adhered to by the Supreme Court justices? And please mention your position on term limits for justices and your position on expanding the number of justices. Congressman Amodei, we'll have you start.
I haven't thought a lot about term limits for justices. The thing I liked about the way the framers did that was they were the people who were supposed to be beyond the reach of the election, elbowing and rough and tumble and stuff like that. So I'd have to think about that, although, there is that argument since Greg and I are equally young compared to those people, some of them.
I thought 55 was a senior.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm not a member of AARP yet. I'm not mature enough to be a member. But anyhow, as far as ethical standards, it's like, I don't know what they are because I'm never a threat to be one. But I know when you're put in that position where you're beyond the electorate, you sure as heck better be to the highest ethical standards. So I know we have them for judges in Nevada. And we have a judicial discipline commission, and we have ways to check on that, even though they are elected. But there ought to be ethical standards. The other one was term limits, ethical standards, and expanding.
Yeah.
You know what? The thing that bothers me about that is kind of like the filibuster in the Senate, where it's like, hey, listen, when you're the minority party, which I've been a lot, I wish the rules were different. But when you're the majority, and so. Expanding the Supreme Court, let's just cut to the quick. Well, who's doing the appointing when we're going to expand them? And that instantly turns it political, and we need less political in that branch of government, not more.
Thank you, Congressman Amodei. Mr. Kidd?
I would agree with Mark that we do not want to basically have a constantly expanding Supreme Court. I think we learned that back under FDR. I do believe the filibuster rule is good because it causes folks to have to work in the middle. In general, I think we should make the government we have work, and that takes responsibility and leadership from the individuals in place. When it comes to the Supreme Court, I don't think we should have to have term limits, but I think it's been proposed 18 years, and if that was far enough out, I think we could live with that. I'm okay with that because that's just, but you can't just kind of put it in place quickly, okay? But look, on the issue of ethics in the Supreme Court, everywhere, okay? So, I don't know how all you were raised, but there's kind of like rules and then there's judgment, right? And so, when people say rules are for fools, well, rules are important, but judgment is really, really important. And so, when you're going to try to basically legislate ethics through rules, it's challenging. So you need principles. I would like better of our Supreme Court justices in this regard because they're role models. Like, just imagine if Charles Barkley was on the Supreme Court, right? So legislating ethics is challenging. It's challenging, right? And ultimately, like these past impeachment inquiries, what's a technical valuation? What were you supposed to do that were your official duties versus not? All this stuff, I'm not through governance, through litigation, or in this case, prescription. We need to start with principles, and I do believe we should expect better from our Supreme Court and really all of our government officials, including me. We have clay feet. We don't have to be like punishing about this. But yeah, I'd like to see a rebirth of ethics, and I'd like to see a rebirth of the middle.
Thank you. And Congressman Amodei, any kind of rebuttal to that?
No, ma'am.
All right. Thank you both so much for answering these questions. You will both have 1 minute for a closing statement. Since Congressman Amodei went first, let's have you, Mr. Kidd, do the first closing statement for 1 minute, please.
So again, I feel like the luckiest person on this planet because I get a chance to be here tonight, both because of the system. I thank Mark for making this possible tonight. I thank this whole association here, all the women here. This morning was all men.
There's some guys out there.
No, I know, but the women are in charge.
Yeah,
okay?
that's true. That's true. We both know that.
And look, Nevada is an exceptional place. I love that it is free. That sounds kind of Republican, fair. That sounds kind of Democrat, and wild. Well, that is Nevada, but it's not wild without looking forward. We need to take risks. It's always been in Nevada's tradition. We take calculated risks. And with that, we will build the Nevada of the future, which will be the most exceptional and divergent state in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. And Congressman Amodei?
I yield back. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I
Okay.
I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. Hey, well, thank you guys, and thanks, Greg. Nobody leave the room tonight and say, well, because I was born here or because I'm a Republican, you should vote for me. We have always strived to give you much more than that. But the reason that we talk about how long you've been here is because it allows you, remember it's a 24-month term, it allows you to triage situations quickly, personally, and also to know where to go based on that service, not only federally, but at the state level, and living the experience of Nevada. So if there's a problem with the train being parked across tracks in Carlin, you know who Union Pacific is, you know where Omaha is, and they got to come talk to you. And so we've run every time and worked every time during those 24 months on producing results for you, whether you're a veteran with the problem, whether you're a community with the problem, whether you're municipal government with a problem or a state with a problem, and we've tried to earn that paycheck every day. And so the request is very simple. We think that we have earned your trust, highest ethical standards, and we'd appreciate an opportunity to serve for 24 more months.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Congressman Mark Amodei and Greg Kidd. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. All right, we're gonna get into the ballot questions now, starting with ballot question number 1. If passed, it would remove all references to the Board of Regents, which oversees higher education institutions, from the Nevada Constitution. Instead, it would authorize the state legislature to review and reform programs and operations and require biennial audits. Tonight, I'm joined by Dr. Jill Derby. She served 3 6-year terms on the Nevada Board of Regents as the elected representative for this district. She currently serves as a senior consultant and senior fellow for the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges based in Washington, D.C. She is the author of a recently published book titled When You Dare to Say Yes, Jill Derby and Nevada Activism. Thank you so much, Dr. Derby. Tell us about ballot question number 1.
Start by acknowledging everybody to be here. I'm just a great advocate for citizen engagement, and this is just a great example of what needs for a democracy. I talk about it in my book, but democracies don't work if citizens aren't engaged. So congratulations to all of you finding out what's going on. So let me talk about, I want to set the stage and give you some context for ballot question 1, which is about the Board of Regents. Because one of the things I know is a lot of people don't vote on issues on the regent candidates because they say, well, what's a regent? And a lot of people don't know what regents are. So I want to just give you a little bit of context and frame that question for you so you'll understand that. The Nevada Constitution established they call it the University of Nevada, and there was only one at the time when that was put into the Constitution. What we now have is a system of higher education called the Nevada System of Higher Education. NSHE. It encompasses both universities, UNLV, UNR, the State College, Nevada State College down in Henderson, the 4 community colleges around the states. Nevada, Western Nevada College is one of those. There's one in Elko, 2 in, down south. And also the Desert Research Institute. So we now have a system of higher education, and our system is for an elected board from districts that will be the governing authority. So I just want to say something about why the Constitution incorporated that principle for an elected Board of Regents. From the earliest time, there was an understanding with our forefathers that boards that govern universities and colleges and schools should be separate from the government. Around the world, you should know this is really an exception. In most countries in the world, it's the government, it's the Ministry of Education that governs colleges, universities, and schools. Our principle for 2,200 years now has been no, there should be separate governance authority for our schools and our colleges so that it keeps the government out of the business of educating its citizens. And the idea is that governments come and go, and governments have the different political ideologies, and that should be kept out of these independent school boards and colleges. Now, we know in today's polarized and partisanized environment, that isn't what's going on, but it shouldn't be going on, because that's the principle, is keep these boards separate so their sole focus is on the quality of education, the success of students, and not being guided by whatever the political winds of the time dictates in the government. So that's why it's initially in the Constitution, it should be elected by the people. Now, what's come up is some issues of dissatisfaction around the system and the comportment of the Board of Regents as it has performed its governance responsibilities. And as a result of that, this constitutional question amendment suggests that it should be taken out of the hands of the people and put in the hands of the legislature. Let me say that across the country, and I work nationally on this, there are many states where the governor appoints the Board of Regents. There are states, fewer, but that legislatures appoint the Board of Regents. And then there are many places where boards are elected. No matter what the selection process is, the idea is that they should remain independent, focused on the educational missions, and not let politics intrude. Unfortunately, we know that that isn't what's going on today. So this amendment has come about is a fairly major change. For all these years that it's been in the Constitution, the Board of Regents, as called forth in the Constitution, is an elected body. It has come up before, as recently as 2020, but also a couple of times before that. The legislature has gotten dissatisfied with the way that the board has conducted its governance responsibility, and has this question has come forward. So it's on the ballot this time. That's the context so that you understand really the whole bigger picture. So there isn't much more I can say. I will answer questions as they come in, but I think fundamentally, if you read the sample ballot, it lays out on both sides of it the merits and the merits of each, the dismerits of each. So I don't know that I can speak so much that, but for you to understand why this has come, that it's a fundamental change. Should the legislature be in charge of the governance of our colleges and universities, or should it be an elected Board of Regents? Doesn't mean that if the legislature is in charge, there won't be a Board of Regents, but it would likely be appointed by them, and they would have the oversight responsibility that the independent Board of Regents now has.
Thank you, Dr. Derby. We've all gotten our sample ballots, but could you go into some of those pros and cons to this?
Well, let me say this. In some states where the legislature has taken over this governance responsibility and has appointed the Board of Regents or the Board of Trustees or the Board of Governors, they're called different things in different states, they have had a set of guidelines that ensures that people with appropriate backgrounds, understandings, and skill sets are appointed to boards. That isn't the case when you leave it up to the general public. And the other side of that is that does the general public understand the qualifications that a candidate should have? And would the legislature understand that better? In other words, in terms of the composition of the Board of Regents, could it be more fine-tuned in terms of the range of competencies and backgrounds that people bring to be on that board? On the other hand, I have to say that in states where it is the governor or the legislature, politics has intruded to a fairly strong degree. And unfortunately, it becomes a partisan issue. Is it a Republican governor? Then he wants to just appoint Republicans. And there can be an issue of who has supported you in your elections that can enter into these kind of discussions. So that's basically it. Who is better qualified? Is it the general public to decide, or should the legislature decide according to whatever directives they decide upon? In other words, in some states, there are guidelines. There are many states there are not. So it's what I want to say is that this question proposes a solution to what is seen by a number of people, particularly legislators and other members of the public, as a problem with the comportment of the Board of Regents. And I would have to acknowledge that over the last decade, the board has not distinguished itself in the way that it has comported itself. There's been the partisan divide, there have been divisiveness, there's been some disruptions, and incivility in the way they've conducted themselves, some sense that poor decisions were made. And I think that's part of what has driven this. The question is this the solution that would bring about a better Board of Regents, or is it more important to leave it in the hands of the people as the Constitution first prescribed?
I'm curious if you think this could give community colleges more input on allocation of funding and resources.
Well, here's the question that is interesting, is that one of the, I've always been such an advocate in my years on the Board of Regents here in Nevada and the work I do nationally, such an advocate for community colleges. I just think they're the jewel of systems of higher education. And I think what they provide in a state is so important. There has been frustration on the part of the community colleges over the years that in a system that includes universities, it's hard to get your priorities, your interests, your voice heard to the degree that universities can, because the universities are the big show. I mean, they have alumni all over the place, they have football teams, basketball teams, et cetera, and the community colleges, as you know, function at a less, they don't have the same kind of alumni or the big ticket items that people love in terms of the sports programs. And it's not, it is that way across the country, I should tell you. And in some places, there are separate systems. A system of universities, and a board for universities, a board for community colleges, and a board for state colleges. California does that, 3 separate boards. We haven't done that in Nevada. And there are regents that have been great advocates for the community colleges, but it's hard to get your priorities front and center as much as the universities that are big dogs in the game. That's the story. Now, what's uncertain is whether or not this solution solves that problem. Would taking the authority for the selection of the board out of the hands of the public, your right to vote for them, and putting it in the hands of the legislature, would that guarantee that the community colleges would have more influence and sway in particularly budget items, but items that are specific to them. And I think that's unknown. It depends on what legislature's in place at the time this passes the next election. And as it is now, community colleges do, of course, have the opportunity to lobby the board, but there is a sense among the community colleges that if in fact the governance authority for the universities and colleges was in the hands of the legislature, that their voice would have more lobbying strength.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Derby. Really appreciate your time tonight. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to jump to ballot question number 5, which would provide a sales tax exemption for both child and adult diapers. To be speaking about this topic is going to be Eric Jimenez, Chief Policy Deputy for the Nevada State Treasurer's Office. He's worked on a variety of projects which range from infrastructure financing to increasing access to healthcare and financial independence for marginalized communities. Thank you so much, Mr. Jimenez, for being here. Take us through what would ballot question 5 do?
Thank you so much for having me, and I would just take a point of personal privilege. Tonight's just a great night to focus on civic engagement, but also I think the importance of local journalism. So can we please give a round of applause for our moderator for doing such a great job tonight?
Thank you.
But as Lucia mentioned, my name's Eric Jimenez. I'm a Chief Deputy in the State Treasurer's Office, which means we handle a lot of your money. And I can tell you we have a lot of it right now. That doesn't always seem to be the case, but for the moment we do. Broadly, question 5, would amend the sales and use tax of 1955 to provide an exemption for both child and adult diapers, including disposable diapers. Now, many of you may be asking, why should we, why isn't the legislature handling this? Why is it coming up for a ballot initiative? Well, in 1956, the wise people of Nevada approved question 8, which is a referendum that prohibits the legislature from amending or repealing the sales and use tax without voter approval. So whenever we propose anything for the sales tax, it has to go before the voters. In the last legislative session, there was Senate Bill 428, which brought this concept essentially to remove diapers from the sales and use tax, and it was passed unanimously by the legislature. I think there was one member absent. Currently, 19 states, including the District of Columbia, exempt diapers from taxation. There are 26 states that do not exempt diapers from taxation, and 5 states that don't have a sales tax whatsoever, so they can't really be counted in that. Within this ballot question, I think one of the biggest kind of concerns is what are the fiscal impacts and what other things do we exempt from the sales and use tax? Well, we currently exempt the purchase of newspapers, manufactured homes and mobile homes, gas, electricity, water, food for consumption, and certain medical equipment as well as farm equipment for the sales and use tax. So this is not out of the realm of possibility. It's not a single use case. And then some of you may remember in the 2018 election, you were able to vote on 2 specific ballot initiatives which exempted certain products from the sales and use tax. One of them was question 2, which was feminine hygiene products, and then also durable medical equipment and mobility devices were also passed to be exempted from the sales and use tax. So if this passes, what are the fiscal impacts? And I'm going to do my best to try to be both sides on this, even though I do have my own personal opinions. But what are the fiscal impacts? We know that nationally there is about $12.3 billion spent in each year on diapers. So if we take Nevada's share of the population, we would expect, if we use 2024 as an example, that there would be about $117.3 million purchased in diapers this year. In terms of revenue, what that would mean, it would mean a $2.3 million reduction to the state sales tax. It would mean a $3 million reduction to the local school support tax, $0.6 million reduction for the basic city-county relief tax, and a $2 million reduction to the supplemental city-county relief tax. So from a state perspective, that's about $7.9 million. When 13 of 17 counties also have additional sales tax components that they use to pay for services, which is why sometimes if you're in Carson City, you might pay a little less for a car than in Washoe County. But for those purposes as well, this ballot measure would impact local sales tax revenue as well, and that would be to the tune of about $1.6 million per year for our local governments. Altogether, I think it sounds like a lot, but that would be about $9.5 million in revenue that would be lost by state and local government. This particular ballot measure is set to expire in 2050. So if voters choose to enact it, it would be enacted in 2025 and would expire in 2050, which would mean, if you did a straight line calculation, that would be $247 million in total lost revenue. And then if you did an inflationary kind of escalator on that, I have my math at about $319.8 million. You'll notice in your ballot, the opposition arguments say that this would cost over $400 million. I think they are applying a far too aggressive inflationary measure on that, and I think it's much smaller. So that seems like a lot of money, and I think a lot of people would say that it would. But we have a $5.2 billion general fund budget from a state perspective, and the total loss in revenue from this proposal would be 0.00197% of our annual budget. So, and I think we can get into the arguments for and against. While we do think, while it may be safe to say that this would result in reductions in revenue from a state perspective, it's not that much.
Thank you. We're getting toward the end, so I'll just ask one question, kind of, have you talked to parents and kind of why is this necessary?
Yeah, so working families, diapers are one of their biggest expenses. I think the estimates that I saw were that the average Nevada family that has a child would spend between $1,000 and $1,200 per child per year on diapers. So any relief that we can provide families, even if it's just one diaper purchase, I think is real in this economy as gas and groceries and everything else gets more expensive. The numbers that I've seen is that this would save the average family with a child $84 per child per year, which may not sound like a lot of money for some people, but I think some people it's the difference between, am I able to get diapers this month, or can I buy some groceries for my family to live on?
Thank you so much, Mr. Jimenez. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll actually start with ballot question 2. Another ballot question that would revise part of the Nevada Constitution, which would change some language that refers to public entities for people with mental illness, blindness, and deafness. Here to talk about ballot question 2 is Senator Robin Titus. She was elected to the Nevada State Senate in 2022, and she previously served in the Nevada Assembly from 2015 to 2021, and she's also a board-certified physician. Senator Titus, tell us about this ballot question.
Stayed for these ballot questions. You came here to hear, I know, Mr. Kidd and Congressman Amity, but I think these ballot questions are critically important, and I've been doing a lot of talks around the state to different groups on these ballot initiatives, so thank you for wanting to get educated on it. I have the honor of being the author of question 2. So I was very excited when I was asked to be in pro of it, or at least explain it. So I want to do a quick civics lesson here. The only way we can change our Constitution in Nevada is through a ballot initiative where we go out and we get a petition and people sign it, or it comes through the legislative process. Question 2 came through the legislative process. It was a bill I introduced in 2021 after I had a constituent from Fallon reach out to me because he was hard of hearing. And he was teaching a class with students who were hard of hearing, and they looked at the Nevada Constitution, and they saw in that, and mind you, our Constitution was written in 1864, that the term in our Constitution referred to the obligations of our state, taking care of the institutions for the benefit of the insane, blind, deaf, and dumb. And his students asked, well, why is that still in our Constitution? Hence his phone call to me. And so I then started that process of saying, well, maybe we need to upgrade the Constitution. And changing our Constitution, I take very, very seriously. And the process goes that in order for it to do through the legislative process, it has to be brought forward through initially it was Assembly Bill Joint Resolution number 1 from the 81st session, which was, again, my bill. I had every member of the healthcare committee that I presented it to, after they heard the testimony of the students saying, hey, this language does affect us still, words do mean something, they all wanted to be co-sponsors. It passed unanimously through both houses and was signed by our governor, and then it had to be brought back a second time. And again, same different group of kids, same testimony, again, the same results. Everybody wanted to be co-sponsors, passed unanimously, signed by our governor. But then, to change the Constitution, it has to go back to you. It has to go back to the people to vote. So we as elected officials can't do it ourselves. We have to have the vote. So it will be law, it will change our Constitution, but I took that very seriously about changing our Constitution. And that, if you'll read the no on these questions, would be the only argument against this. It does affect our Constitution. But our forefathers really were respectful of that, and I was very respectful of that. And so this is one I think is worth a vote yes. I'm proud to have been the author of it, and I think it's just changed one line in our Constitution, and it really is about accountability and responsibility for us.
And one quick question before we get into the next ballot question. What do you have to say to the criticism that, the Nevada Constitution is a historical document, it can't keep changing as language evolves, it's history? How do you respond to that?
Well, I would say that our federal Constitution also has history, but we have had 27 amendments to the federal Constitution, and it also requires a lot of work. The first 10 amendments were the Bill of Rights, and so these documents had our forefathers, including in 1864, they understood that this is what works today. It has to be a very big issue and hard to change it. And so hence we went through all of that. And I take that very seriously on the process. It's been vetted, and I feel strongly and honored actually have been the author of this bill.
Thank you, Senator Titus. And we'll have you stay up, and now we will get into... Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Now we're going to be talking about ballot question number 4, which would remove language from the Nevada Constitution again that allows the use of slavery and involuntary servitude as criminal punishments. Here to talk about ballot question 4 is Don Gallimore. He's an executive board member of the Reno Sparks NAACP. He is the former president for the Nevada Alliance for Retired Americans and Plan Action and Faith in Action, My Journey Home, and GANG board member. He's been a registered Nevada lobbyist since 2009. Thank you so much, Mr. Gallimore. Talk us through ballot question 4.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, evening.
Time doesn't exist during the election.
Yeah, no, anybody who knows me, and I'm glad to be here, thank you. Anyone who knows me, and my wife, Patricia, knows we're some of the busiest people in northern Nevada, so I might think it's Christmas. One of the main things that we have to keep in mind is that this bill has been passed twice, and essentially it's been unanimous. So it's almost unanimous consent to pass in this election. But the opponents basically don't have any concerns except for the fact that maybe it is just language that shouldn't have been in there in the first place. But the Constitution of the United States has in there that you can be a slave or indentured servant if you've committed a crime. And that's what this is for, to try to rectify that. It's good, the questions that we need to look at, since this is going to probably be passed anyway, are the moral and ethical reasons for this to be a part of the Constitution in the first place. We were the Mississippi of the West back in the early in the 1900s, and that was because of things that were in the Constitution. And Nevada was more or less the main state in order to change the Civil War. So essentially, we were the turning point, our decision to make this state, this country, Confederate or Union. And one of the questions is maintaining that language good for history, or is it just bad to erase in history? Essentially, if you whitewash something, that is taking out the history of the state. And we're trying to make sure that that's what we want to do, that we don't want to eliminate any of our history, because that is who we are. Reno stands for run every person out, and it starts with an N. And so that's something that our residents are very proud to say that. But the other main thing, that's the question that everyone has to answer: is this going to be good for our history, just to keep it in history, or to erase it and whitewash what we have? The other thing is to look at the sponsors. Now, this has been sponsored by Howard Watts, Assembly McPherson, and Dallas Harris, Patricia Spearman, who were senators. ACLU, Abolish Slavery National Network, they were also supporters of this. And so that means that it's kind of a blue, well, the NAACP, Reno Sparks NAACP has been very integral in bringing us this, and it is national, yes. But and that's my wife, Patricia. She's the president. She's the president, and she's also a national board member. So she is extremely influential nationally with the NAACP here in Western Nevada. As a matter of fact, she is the first one in Western Nevada history to be a national board member. But we just look at the supporters, and this tends to say it's a blue support system, but as I mentioned, it's been unanimous. The only state so far that has left slavery and indentured servitude on their books is Louisiana. So everyone else is more or less assented by at least 60%. So this is going to be an easy fix. Everybody just has to look at the moral aspect of how they feel about verbiage, because that's all it's going to be. And that's something that I think that everyone here is going to have to make a decision on, because that is the only deterrent or a thing that's a problem, a wall that's up for that. And that's pretty much it. 13th Amendment, as I mentioned, is still in play, and so that does say indentured servitude and slavery. So that's something that maybe we have to deal with. But that's
Yeah,
pretty
Mr.
much
Gallimer,
all I'm looking at for now.
One quick follow-up question for you. Some have argued that work programs for incarcerated people are a form of involuntary servitude. Can you clarify how prison programs work, and would they be impacted by this measure?
That's the problem that everyone's going to have to be consulted with, confronted with, is that even though the language and verbiage will be changed to just say neither slavery or indentured servitude will not be legal in the state, no other programs have, at least thus far, been overtly affected by any proposals or any proposed change of language. So in essence, there will still be slavery, especially in the prison system. They're making, I believe, about $7 an hour, and that's for the most stringent jobs. And that was figures from quite a while ago, so they've probably changed. But essentially, if you can live, and I don't care if you're a prisoner or not, on $7 a day, it's questionable, and the verbiage of that is questionable as to how they are perceived.
Thank you, Mr. Gallimore. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now going to ballot question 6, this time for reals. I'm sorry. Okay, so while we're getting set up for ballot question 6, it would need to pass again in 2026 in order to establish the right to an abortion in the Nevada Constitution. So tonight, for this ballot question, we're going to have 2 speakers arguing the pro and con of this ballot question. First, we'll have Dr. Toby Fresholtz. She's a board-certified OBGYN who lives and practices in Reno. She received her MD from the University of Nevada School of Medicine and completed her residency training in OBGYN at Kaiser Permanente in Santa Clara. And again, we're greeted again by Senator Robin Titus. Just as a fresh reminder, she was elected to the Nevada State Senate in 2022, and she previously served in the Nevada Assembly from 2015 to 2021, and she's a board-certified physician. So we are going to first have opening statements from both of the speakers for 5 minutes. We will start with Dr. Toby Fresholtz first, and then we'll get into the questions. Take it away, please.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Toby Fresholtz. Oh, come on. I'm a longtime Nevadan and a board-certified OBGYN. And I'm honored to be here tonight to talk with you about ballot question 6, which enshrines the right to abortion into our state constitution. We're lucky. We live in a state with abortion protections. In 1990, you heard about it earlier tonight, a referendum was passed that codified the right to abortion as outlined in Roe v. Wade into our state law. But so much has changed since 1990. Since Roe was overturned in 22, we've seen just about half the states in the nation pass legislation restricting access to abortion. And we've also seen devastating consequences. The stories seem endless. Women denied treatment for miscarriage. Victims of sexual assault forced to carry pregnancies to term, some of them children. Life-saving care delayed until it's nearly too late, or as we recently saw in Georgia, too late. There are so many cases of unnecessary delays in care and, frankly, cruel treatment of pregnant patients. I think we can all agree we never want to hear these stories coming out of Nevada. Question 6 enshrines abortion protections into the Constitution, meaning no matter who is elected to power in our state, healthcare decisions will be between a woman, her family, and her healthcare team, not by politicians. When it comes to something as personal and as complicated as pregnancy, politicians are never more qualified to make decisions than a patient and her trusted provider. You may hear that we don't need this legislation, that Nevada already has sufficient abortion protections. But 2.5 years ago, abortion was legal across the country. And now 1 in 3 women of reproductive age live in a state where they cannot access a safe and legal abortion. It's time to be proactive. It's time to protect the right to abortion in Nevada for good. Question 6 ensures this. Look, I'm just one of over 175 medical professionals who signed on in support of this legislation. The amendment also has the support of the Nevada State Medical Association, members of which I know are here tonight. I can't see anybody. In closing, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting these educational forums. And I thank you all for your attention. And I'm grateful for any opportunity to advocate for Nevada women.
Thank you, Dr. Feschholz.
I also
Sorry,
want to
and so-
thank you for being here and for advocating for Nevada women. It's something that I've spent a career doing. I'm a rural family practice doctor who's delivered a lot of babies, some with prenatal care, some without prenatal care. And I am a strong believer in the individual right of a person to make their own healthcare decisions. So that's my stand, and that's how I've practiced my entire career. Been a doc in my small community for 40 years. I'm still the county health officer. So I come with that background. Why I'm opposed to this bill is for a lot of reasons. You said you support it, and I think there's a misunderstanding and a misleading references on why we need this bill in the state of Nevada, frankly. I am very anxious about any healthcare decisions being in a constitution or through a legislative process. This particular bill, in my mind, was just a political act, and all the scare tactics that you've heard about, all these horrendous things that have truly happened in other states, have not happened in Nevada. Because indeed, in 1990, that bill was codified into law. She mentioned it appropriately because it was. It was put to you, the voters, and I mentioned earlier how critical it is that you're the component here. In 1990, it went to a vote of the people, and you said, hey, here's what this is, and here's what we believe, and it passed. And so as part of our law, we as politicians, elected officials, despite what the ads may say, despite what the ads have been running that we're going to put people in jail for their choices, that is not accurate at all. It's misinformation and scare tactics. You cannot be put it, we cannot change this law. Only you can change this law. So putting it into our Constitution is truly just, in my mind, a scare tactic. We have the strongest, in my mind, of any state, access already. What I don't like about the language in this bill, as a physician, it truly takes the physician word out of the language. And all it says is that you have a provider, a qualified healthcare practitioner. But there's no definition to what that really means. And so for me, as a provider, I want to make sure that if you are indeed having the access to an abortion, which I feel you have, and I have counseled many patients on whether that would be a choice for them, and some decided to do so, some decided not to. But again, I believe it's an individual woman's right to decide that. And so I still feel strongly this bill, in so many ways, does a disservice to women. It does a disservice to parents, because again, there's no, right now, there's some parental information there. This one takes all that away, and that any female has a right to any abortion at any time without any parental notification. Like I said, I've delivered babies in the emergency room with a 16-year-old who swore she'd never had a baby or had intercourse. With her mom there going, well, why is she hemorrhaging? And I said, well, she's about to deliver. And so I've been in that situation where a woman didn't make a choice to have that abortion, and then I've been in other areas where they did. So I would submit to you that this is a scare tactic to get voter turnout, that you have the best protection right now. We politicians cannot take that away. And by the way, the ads that you're seeing about in vitro fertilization, this bill has nothing to do with that. So when they augment this argument with things that are not even part of this discussion, in my mind, that's just scare tactics.
Could a national, Dr. Titus, could a national abortion ban supersede Nevada's law?
So you have federal regulations, and that Roe versus Wade, that was the federal law. And then when they kicked that out, they put it back to states' right. Our states were way ahead of that game. We saw as other states have gone out, and I admit that, I think it's wrong. Other states have gone out. Nevada is already, unfortunately, a destination place now for women to come and have their abortions, and then they go home. And it's frustrating to me that women have to do that. I don't support that at all. But this bill will not change that. And so, depending on what we do on a federal level will be unknown at this point in time. I'm sure that congressionally there may be more information coming on what happens. But again, I believe in a woman's fundamental right to self-determination and care.
And Dr. Frischholz, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, lots of things. So first of all, yes, we are, like I said, lucky to live in a state with existing abortion protections. And if any of the folks who worked in 1990 to get that passed is here tonight.
Can I have you move the mic a bit closer?
Thank
Just
you.
put it on the edge of the table. Sorry, they're very sensitive.
Yes, I applaud you if you're in the room tonight, if you're one of the folks that worked on the referendum in 1990. And we should be proud to be one of the states that has abortion protections and not these extreme restrictions and bans. But what we have now is one layer of protection, and codifying it into our Constitution is a second, more robust layer of protection, which I think if you look anywhere in the news, you can see why we need that. Second of all, this bill doesn't do anything to change parental rights. It keeps the status quo. So there's nothing in this bill that changes. This bill is very straightforward and simple. It codifies the right to an abortion into our Constitution. It does not change parental rights. In terms of abortions later in pregnancy, I think Nevadans are smart. They know that if a woman is having an abortion later in her pregnancy, it's because she's been faced with a devastating diagnosis, and that diagnosis has in turn caused her to have to face a really challenging choice. And I think that those families should not be exploited for political gain. I think that we should have compassion for them. And that people who have abortions after 20 weeks are very few and far between, and are because they have been faced with a devastating diagnosis.
And a question.
What else did I miss?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's not to turn out Democratic votes. It's freedom. It's protecting freedom into our Constitution. That's not a Democratic issue. That's not a Republican issue. That's a Nevadan issue. And I would just say that I think your question 2 is wonderful. I'm in a big support. And I think that if you're willing to change the Constitution for the dignity of disabled people, then we should be willing to change the Constitution for the dignity and the freedom of women.
Just hold your applause till the end, guys. Last year, there was a lack of abortion providers outside of Las Vegas. Senator Titus, you mentioned that what the Constitution Amendment language would allow. Would allowing advanced practitioners increase access to abortion care?
Well, I think if the nurse practitioners are trained to do that, and if it's something that their board allows them to do, I personally feel that is something. Number one, the education of the provider performing the abortion, making sure that educating the patient, making sure that it's not a back alley abortion, making sure that all the processes happen. I personally would have to see what their training is. I am a supporter and have billed in legislation that allow the advanced practitioners, the PAs and nurse practitioners to practice within their scope. Certainly we have nurse midwives is within their scope now performing an abortion. It would depend on the weeks. I'm very hesitant about that, and I certainly would have to see some a national training process, and I would actually like to hear what the OBGYNs feel on that issue of whether or not they should expand their scope. Certainly that I am not competent, nor would I perform an abortion. Would I have an abortion? No, but that doesn't mean I haven't referred to the people who I felt competent to do that. So for me, I'd really turn to my colleagues, OBGYNs, and feel what they thought that scope should be.
Dr. Frischholz?
So abortion is health care, and just like all other health care in the state, it's provided by trained, qualified, licensed practitioners who are practicing within their scope of practice under the supervision of their regulatory bodies, just like all other healthcare in the state. There are certain parts of abortion care that are appropriate for mid-level providers, and there are surgical parts of the care that are more appropriate for OBGYNs. So just like all other healthcare in the state, it's practiced by people who are qualified, trained, and licensed.
Can I ask her a question? This more about it. So are there, for my information, and thank you for that answer, are there training now nationwide for nurse practitioners, and other states have nurse practitioners performing abortions?
Lots of states have nurse
Allow.
practitioners performing abortions, and they have specific training for that. Doesn't mean every mid-level provider gets abortion training, just like every mid-level provider doesn't assist in the operating room or
Right.
work in the emergency department. But if the goal is to perform abortion care, then that training exists.
Thank you. And last question to wrap up. You hear from voters on all sides of the political spectrum that they don't want government in the bedroom, in the doctor's office. So would this, if this were to pass, would it allow for courts and judges to be more involved in a person's decision to have an abortion? Dr. Titus, let's start with you.
Well, one of the arguments against this is the concern that it would allow for more liability on the practitioners, and so whether or not that is to be seen or not, I certainly think that trial attorneys are all over this. Trial attorneys are not friends of physicians or practitioners. I still have on a sticker on my filing cabinet when I was in medical school that says, support an attorney, go to med school. And so I worry about the trial attorneys and the process and the legal implications of this. I am not an attorney, so whether or not it's not something that I can absolutely say what the legal implications would be. That's one of the concerns about the legal implications. But again, I think the proof will be in the pudding about the lawsuits afterwards.
Dr. Freischultz, your thoughts?
The purpose of this amendment is to keep everybody out of the equation except for a woman, her family, her faith, and her healthcare team. I think that's the point, is to keep people out. If you look at other states where they have restrictions and bans, you have women who are diagnosed with aggressive cancers in their pregnancy calling and begging for life-saving care so that they can get the cancer treatment that they need, calling lawyers, calling legislators who don't understand anything about OBGYN or healthcare. So this actually prevents those types of scenarios.
I'll give you both 30 seconds to respond, Senator Titus.
Great, thank you for that. Because one of the concerns, I think, from a physician standpoint, is that the risk of a provider performing an abortion here in Nevada, and then they're being sued from another state. And so this actually, although our Constitution might say this, it doesn't mean that other state's Constitution says that. So what will happen in other states, this changing our Constitution will not control what other states, especially other state licensed attorneys, choose to do, whether it's coming after the provider or after the recipient of that care. And even though we put it in our Constitution, that's going to be the legal question.
And 30 seconds for you as well, Dr. Freischultz.
I am also not a lawyer and don't necessarily know the answer to that question, but we have existed with this great referendum since 1990, and that has not been the case since Roe was overturned in 22. I'm not aware of any Nevada physicians being sued for providing abortion care to the 170,000 women that traveled in 2023 for abortion care, so I don't see that being a problem going forward.
Okay, thank you both. You will both have 1 minute for closing statements. Senator Titus, we'll start with you this time.
Well, thank you, and again, thank you for being up here with me. And I think you have to be open-minded about that. I think most of you already have your opinions on what to do. I would argue against supporting question 6. I believe in a woman's right to choice, as I've stated, but I think putting this in our Constitution doesn't gain us anything. I think we have good law already codified, that's on the books. The fear, as my colleague mentioned just now about there's not been any lawsuits of our doctors, and that's one of the arguments for passing this is because we want to protect those folks that are coming here, has just been said, hey, there's been no lawsuits already. So I would question supporting this bill. I think that it doesn't do what everybody thinks it should, nor do we need to change what we have coexisting. So I appreciate all of your patience tonight. I appreciate you being here. And again, this is has to be a thoughtful debate. And I think one thing I really appreciated and want to thank, since this is the closing one, you've put on 4 of these. You have people in the audience. It's thoughtful. You're here. You're asking the questions. And again, that's part of a good citizenry, is citizen engagement. So thank you for being here. You can have a conversation with your neighbor. You can agree to disagree, but you know what? We're still good citizens and we still care about our state. So I want to thank you for this. I want to thank you for being up here with me. And I know that for my career, I've been passionate about women, Nevada, and individual rights to freedom and liberty. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Titus. Oh. And closing statements from you, Dr. Freischultz.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Amendment 6 is very straightforward. It's not complicated. It does one thing. It enshrines the right to abortion care into our Constitution, and it gives us that second layer of protection. We see the extremism all over the state, all over the various states. We see the abortion bans. We see the talk of a national minimum standard, which is a federal abortion ban. We need to be proactive. Why would we wait? In Florida right now, women are living under a 6-week abortion ban, and they are voting this November to try to regain their rights. Let's not be in a position to try to regain our rights. Let's be proactive and protect our rights.
Dr. Freischultz, Dr. Titus, thank you so much.
Have a good day. It's midnight.
All right, just a couple thanks for sticking with us. Just a couple closing statements from the League of Women Voters.
I just wanted to thank again our candidates that came here tonight, all the presenters for the ballot questions, and mainly all of you for coming and staying here for over 2 hours and hopefully leaving with a voting plan. Go vote. Thank you.